Stevie Chadwick.
Mr Speaker, Labour will be supporting this bill. In fact, the objective of this bill is to protect and enhance children and family safety, and I'm sure that's a sentiment shared across the House, and it's great to see the member who's taken his seat speak out too, because ethnic communities need to be part of the solution in our country about the appalling rates of child abuse. Mr Speaker, last year in the House I remember the Minister for Social Development standing up and haranguing us in opposition that we did nothing about child abuse in this country, and I was hurt and I took great offence to that remark from the Minister who's now in the chair, and so did Annette King, and so did all other Labour members who had started off a journey facing up to the fact that we had appalling levels of child abuse in this country, and did many things to start this journey that is now starting to produce legislation to try and fix the levels of domestic violence and family violence in this country. We set up things like the Family Violence Task Force that had ministers of every portfolio overlapping in an all-of-government approach to address the systemic and the complex issues about family violence. We also set up a cross-party committee, and I have to state in the House today that it was Judith Collins who was invited as the spokesperson at the time, who didn't attend one of those meetings. And that's why I was so distressed when the Minister Paula Bennett said that we had done nothing in government in 9 years. We had the Te Rito family violence strategy that we were implementing very, very consistently across all government portfolios. We also facilitated a breakfast session of all parties, and it was a good sentiment, called the Littleys Lobby. This government has been in government for 1 year and has not set up or continued any cross-party support to discuss issues that impact on children and families like the Littleys Lobby. It stopped at the end of the election. Here we are now, 14 months later, and there is no opportunity for us to network across party of all those that care about family violence and protection of children in our society. We also thought that we would see a platform for Every Child Counts. In opposition, Nationals said, what are you doing about children? Every child counts. The 5 strategic planks of Every Child Counts matters to us, but nothing, sir. Absolutely nothing about us all getting together, getting experts and advocates coming to speak to us as MPs to talk about what we can do along program lines and legislation lines to make a difference. And I think that's a shame, and I think it's arrogant, because the answers lie with all of us here as legislators in this House. From the Littleys Lobby, we moved to do things like repeal Section 59. We brought in an assessment tool used by GPs, midwives, family doctors, accident and emergency, to assess and diagnose early signs of child abuse that were the manifestation of family violence. And those early intervention models were well established by the Labour government. And I wanted that on the record to show that we certainly didn't just sit on our hands. But the sad thing about this bill, even though we will support it, and it does go some way to the legislative end of addressing domestic violence and the impact of child abuse, it actually does nothing to address the causes and the drivers of child abuse. And that is about the early intervention model that we haven't heard of from this government. They just want to legislate, and then they just want to sentence people and put them away, but they're doing nothing about the development of early intervention models and community development models that make a difference in dysfunctional families' lives. There's a wonderful resource, Dr. Annabelle Taylor, who's the chair of the Family Health Trust in Christchurch, and she says it's not just about programs, it's not just about resources, but it is about everybody working together. And she says for every $1 spent on early intervention models, the cost-benefit effectiveness is $19 saved by the state at the end on legislation like this that addresses and puts people in jail. Early intervention models work. We're not seeing any evidence, and we look forward to whānau ora to see if we're going to see evidence of early intervention and community development, because that builds resilient children and resilient families and then resilient communities. There's no good just looking at legislation. And then I want to point out too here that, last night we saw it again, boot camp bill, great answer, kick them in jail, put them on boot camps. That's not the way we address it. You address housing, you address poverty, you address parenting. Those are the drivers of children that later on become dysfunctional, and that's been my life work actually as a midwife. Here we are again, another piece of legislation, but Annette King actually, as a result of the ministerial task force, introduced in 2008 the Domestic Violence Reform Bill, a wonderful bill. It was the result of us going out to communities, National Council of Women, all of the intervention services, all of the support services, about how can we make protection orders work. Our National Council of Women came in and gave lots of great ideas. That bill languishes on the order paper as number 45, and yet here we are addressing a bill that has omitted so many aspects that were in Cabinet's papers that would actually address domestic violence. And I'll tell you where it comes up short, Simon, and I know that you too are committed to making sure that we address all of the multi-tenanted facets of family and child abuse. But 5 major planks are omitted from this bill. So it's an imperfect tool, and we'll support it, and we'll try to make it a little bit better. Our Domestic Violence Reform Bill changed the age of the child. That's missing in this bill. So here we were last night talking about children going into boot camps, but this bill has a different age again, something so simple that could have been addressed and should be addressed in this bill, so that the Domestic Violence Act could cover someone under the age of 18, which is, according to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. Currently, a child is anyone under 17. This bill doesn't provide the court with the power to direct attendance to an addiction treatment program. Labor's bill would have fixed that. How silly. Why didn't they refer to the Cabinet papers in the drafting of this bill rather than putting it in and saying, we'll fix the drivers here of domestic violence? There was another aspect here about information. This bill doesn't require people to have an information session when they've had a protection order issued against them. And how good that would have been, so that the victims of domestic violence would have known where to go to keep the other children in the family safe, or the women themselves, or in some fact the men. And here we are in the paper today, a manifestation of sitting on their hands and doing nothing. Survivors are speaking out for family violence reforms. We'll go and hear them. We'll go and listen to them. Everything that was in our Domestic Violence Reform Bill was covered off to look after victims of domestic violence, and it's missing in this bill. And I think that's just terribly sad. It's an oversight. It's also a response that the Minister Simon Power, who really is keen on law and order, has moved too fast and not looked at the detail to correct the detail that went into this bill. If he would have stacked the two up side by side with Annette's bill that actually was the result of the ministerial task force, then we would have got a much more perfect bill. I think it's a shame that that bill isn't the bill that we're talking about today, and we would have had something much more perfect. That's right, you can. Ours was. Thank you for that. So this is short. Judith Collins actually, when she came in, ranted on in all the press releases about doing something for victims of family violence. Well, this is a short order. It falls short for the victims, for the women of domestic violence, and we'll support it. We'll try to make it better.